Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and we've been hearing a lot about a Nintendo Direct. Now, to be completely fair here, there's rumors about a new Nintendo Direct seemingly every single week of the year, but every once in a while, those rumors actually have some merit, and today is one of those days. A Nintendo Direct is going to happen relatively soon, and it sounds like Xbox could be a big part of that showcase. Their partnership together could get very interesting, and we're going to talk about that today. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Xbox, because they are listening as of this moment. If there is one thing that I do like about Xbox is that they don't mind reversing their decisions when it's clear that they're in the wrong. Now, a lot of that comes down to money, but, they did this years ago when they jacked up the price for Xbox Live Gold. They quickly reversed that decision, and even earlier this week, they also reversed their decision for $80 games. Well, now on top of that, it also seems like they're reversing their decision for a code in a box for both Ninja Gaiden 4 and The Outer Worlds 2. This was seemingly confirmed by the Canadian retailer PNP, but I am going to go ahead and spread some caution when it comes to this. For one, retailers do get things wrong from time to time. This is not an official confirmation from Xbox themselves, and that is worth keeping in mind. But even more so, yes, a disc is preferable over a code in a box, but I also can't ignore that most of their recent physical releases haven't exactly included the data on the disc itself. So they've basically gone in that Nintendo keycard direction, but maybe a little bit more discreetly. So if you are a physical collector and if you want all of your data on disk and you don't want a code in the box, this, that, and the other, I would still approach these games with at least some caution until we get that 100% confirmation. Now, we also got word that Ubisoft canceled a Star Wars Outlaws sequel. This comes from the ever-reliable Tom Henderson, as he claimed that it was in early production, but Ubisoft decided not to go forward with its development any longer, which, honestly, I don't think is overly surprising. I do understand that some people really enjoyed this game, but for the most part, it wasn't exactly super well received for various different reasons, and more importantly, it didn't meet internal expectations either. Far from it, from my understanding. And that's one of the things about these type of games. Something that game companies are kind of learning right now is that these licensing deals are a double-edged sword. And I'm not saying that's the main issue when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws, but as a whole, license deals like this gives game publishers an opportunity to work on a super popular IP that's well known outside of the gaming sphere. But there's also a lofty price that comes along with that. These type of games are very expensive to make, which further jacks up their sales expectations. I mentioned this when we talked about Wonder Woman and its cancellation. Technically, yes, Wonder Woman is a very popular character in the comic book universe, but is Wonder Woman going to be as anticipated by gamers who might not have as much knowledge about that character, enough to counteract its expensive development? And truthfully, I'm not convinced of that. To me, there's really only a few non-gaming franchises that make sense to do that with, and that's just like your mega popular franchises like Spider-Man, Batman, Harry Potter, and actually Star Wars, which, brings me back to Outlaws. In my opinion, I think Ubisoft just kind of fumbled the bag here. Not that they're ever going to acknowledge that themselves, but yeah, licensed games like this cost a lot of money, and this game clearly didn't sell enough to merit a sequel. I think for Ubisoft, sticking with their own franchises that's going to be, cheaper to make might be the better bet for them. But even still, they also need to, learn to make better games. Moving on, though, we also have another game delay to talk about. This is actually the second delay of the week, though this time it's for Dying Light: The Beast. It was originally planned to release next month, but instead it's now been moved to September 19th, and basically they said that this is to better polish the game. In their own words, they said, "This additional time will allow us to work on crucial feedback we received during playtest and preview events." Though I have to be honest about this, I don't know if I view this as necessarily a good sign. The thing is that the original Dying Light launched in a pretty poor state. I mean, other than that, gamers really liked the game, but it had some issues, and I say that because they don't exactly have the greatest track record as is, and I have to wonder if feedback was alarming to them. I mean, unless it's just minor issues, is one extra month really enough time to fix its problems? Now, I'm only speculating. I mean, who knows? But it might be one of those games to maybe wait and see if it performs as expected upon launch. Okay, so let's just go and get into the fun stuff here, because a new Nintendo Direct, by all indication, will happen next week. We got a wave of reports about that today. Nate the Hate, VGC, and Christopher Dring, all respected sources, are all claiming that a new Nintendo Direct is coming, and in the case of the Video Game Chronicles, they're actually saying that it's coming imminently. So that does fit the rumors that it will happen in the final week of July, but there's a couple of things that comes along with this. First is I want to go ahead and set expectations properly. There's always going to be those wild, just unrealistic predictions and rumors. I've seen a lot of rumors about a Zelda Ocarina of Time remake as one such example. And hey, I hope that that's true. That would be absolutely amazing. I'd love for that to happen. But I'm going to be honest with you all, if it actually exists, and there's a big if when it comes to that, well, I'm not personally expecting it to be announced at this specific Direct. Hey, prove me wrong, Nintendo. Please, in this case. Instead, though, from what we're hearing, is that it will be a big Direct, so that's good news, but the priority is mostly for third-party games. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be first-party games there as well, but if I were to make a prediction, I think most of the first-party game announcements will instead be for games that we already know about. In fact, Metroid Prime 4 was recently rated in Korea, which, hey, that's a good sign that it will soon get its release date finally. There's also Kirby Air Riders and Splatoon Raiders. We don't know much about either one of those games, so an update for both of those makes a lot of sense. And I'm also going to go and point out that Camelot is reportedly chipping away on a game that's close to finish. I could see their next game being a surprise summer release, maybe being a new Mario sports game. Sure, we all want a new Golden Sun, that'd be fantastic, but unfortunately it's probably not going to be that. However, that's where third-party announcements could actually be very exciting. I think the Switch 2 could potentially be the most exciting Nintendo console for third-party games since the GameCube. The Switch 2 is a very capable console, and we're going to get a lot more adequate ports compared to what we got on the Switch 1. And I think there's a very good chance that will include 2 major JRPGs that's yet to be announced, both of which are Atlas games, one being ReFantazio and the other Persona 3 Reload. Both of these games are perfect fits for the Switch 2, and it just makes sense. Now, we've also been hearing about Death Stranding on the Switch 2, and that might sound a little bit strange, but it does actually fit with what Kojima has said in the past. Sony does not own the Death Stranding IP, contrary to what a lot of people believe, and Kojima wants to bring it to more platforms. For that matter, I also expect Death Stranding 2 to eventually go multi-platform whenever their exclusive deal with Sony ends, whenever that may be. It could be next year, it could be the year after, who knows. There's one publisher that we're currently hearing a lot about, though, and that's none other than Xbox. Xbox and Nintendo has a partnership this generation. We know that for a fact because Microsoft appeared on Nintendo's list of Switch 2 publishers. And while technically that could just be for Call of Duty, we know that they signed that contract years ago, but that's really not what I'm expecting here. Xbox has 100% committed to their somewhat, not completely, but somewhat multi-platform plan, depending on how you want to look at that whole situation. And they've always liked Nintendo. They've worked with them years before they ever brought anything to Sony, which includes Ori and the Blind Forest and several Rareware titles for Switch Online, and even Banjo-Kazooie for Smash Brothers. So they definitely have a good working relationship with Nintendo, even if it's a little bit one-sided, but it's definitely a great resource of income for Xbox, and that's what they're looking for right now. The thing is, though, is that right now there are rumors that they will soon announce several games for Nintendo and actually even PlayStation as well. And if you think about it, what's the place that makes the most sense to do that? Of course, the Nintendo Direct. So really, I think the main question then becomes is what games are we talking about? And I think there's about 3 to 6 games that comes to mind. One is Sea of Thieves. This was a game that really was just kind of born to be on a Nintendo console, not only because of its art style, it really kind of fits in with Nintendo games, but also because old school Nintendo fans are just as familiar with Rare as Xbox fans. You have to remember that a lot of Nintendo fans grew up on their games, including myself, so, why not bring Sea of Thieves over to the Switch 2? It would probably be very successful, and it would give it an even bigger community than it already has. And keep in mind that this is a live service title. It just makes a lot of sense. Then there's also Forza Horizon 5, another live service title, and some people might think that this one sounds a bit unrealistic, but it is a game that runs fairly well on the Steam Deck, so it absolutely should be able to run on the Switch too. It might be at 30 FPS, but this is very achievable. Then there's 2 more games that comes to mind, and both of these are legacy titles that could introduce Nintendo fans to Xbox's most iconic franchises. Of course, being Halo the Master Chief Collection, and then Gears of War Reloaded. Now, admittedly, Gears of War Reloaded is a little bit less likely in this case because it's going to require more performance, but technically, it is a game that was born on the Xbox One as Gears Ultimate. And the Switch 2 theoretically can, yes, run a lot of Xbox One games. So I don't think that this is necessarily as unrealistic as maybe some people might expect. Now, is it actually going to happen? That's a different story. But either way, both of these games could give Xbox an opportunity to introduce Nintendo fans. And then if the next Halo and the next Gears of War games are exclusive to Xbox, well, then Nintendo fans might be a little bit more enticed to join the Xbox ecosystem to play said games. I mean, we'll see how Xbox handles their strategy. It's kind of hard to keep up with what they're trying to do, but either way, Xbox could show up to the Nintendo Direct in a pretty major way. And hey, who knows, that might also include Bethesda. Some of their recent games includes Oblivion Remaster, Indiana Jones, Starfield a few years back, and then also Doom: The Dark Ages. And I think right away that a Doom port makes a lot of sense. Doom was a big game for the Switch 1, and somehow those games just run very well on every platform, including the Steam Deck. But yeah, I think this Direct already sounds very, very exciting. Let me know what you all think about all this, though. Are you excited about the upcoming Nintendo Direct, and what are your predictions? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.